Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I'm your host, Alan Moore, and today I'm excited to have Jason Mirabella, the founder of Henfruit, a fee-only and virtual planning firm based in Indiana, on the show. Jason has been a longtime member of the XY Planning Network, so he has a little different perspective than some of our recent guests. But Henfruit is actually his second RIA firm. Starting his career out as a financial analyst, he went on to found his first RIA in 2008, but obviously the timing wasn't ideal. He ended up taking a job with a financial planning firm, but went on to found Henfruit a few years later. One thing that really struck me about Jason is his willingness to recognize his strengths, but also his weaknesses. He readily admits that prospecting isn't a strength for him, so he's partnered with another planner that has that strength, which is helping his firm to grow. I think it's an important lesson for all the firm owners out there that we really have to focus on what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, and surround ourselves with folks that have strengths that cover our weaknesses. Ready2 Technologies is a market-leading billing and revenue management solution provider founded in 2002. Ready2 offers 3 billing solutions, with each catering to a specific segment of the financial services industry. In production since 1998, Ready2 Revenue Manager, the company's flagship product, is the investment management industry's first software-as-a-service enterprise billing solution. In 2009, Ready2 launched its second enterprise billing offering, Wealth Manager Enterprise, or WME. WME is purpose-built for the U.S.-based correspondent broker-dealer and TAMP segments, as well as the technology behind Pershing's NetX 360 platform. In 2014, Ready2 introduced BillFin, which is the first cloud-based billing solution for independent financial advisors and RIAs. BillFin is currently the platform of choice for over 200 advisory firms and their custodial firms. Seamlessly integrated with TD Ameritrade, Schwab, RBC, and other industry platforms, BillFin has been getting a lot of attention from the industry. All in all, Ready2 solutions process fees for more than 400 financial firms around the globe. For more information, visit www.ready2.com. That's REDI2.com. You can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/95. And be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN Radio listeners. It's the community of advisors we've all been looking for during our career that is there to provide support when we need it the most. Best of all, it's free. I encourage you to check it out. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Without further ado, here's my interview with Jason. Hey, Jason, welcome to the show, man. Thanks so much for being on.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm really excited because you are one of our longest term members, actually. When we exclude the founding member class that came in, we brought on about 30. Well, we launched with 30 people back in April of 2014 when we first launched XY Planning Network, and honestly grew very slowly. We didn't cross 50 until the end of the year. And you were just telling me before we pushed the record button, that you came on sort of October, November of that time frame. So I'm betting you were in our late 30s, early 40 members. So I'm thrilled to talk with you because you have seen the evolution of XYPN and been running your business, as part of our network really since the beginning for 2 years now, which is really exciting.
Yeah, it's definitely been fun to watch the evolution and the growth.
As usual, we'll take a step back, sort of and just sort of talk about your career path a little bit. So, what was your, plans during college? Did you have aspirations to be a financial planner, or did you think you would sort of take another career path?
I've always wanted to be in the financial industry. I actually remember, I think I was, it was night. I remember watching Black Monday on TV on CNBC. That was kind of my first memory of, and I would guess I would have been 11 at the time. And and then from there, it's sort of the love of the market and the, just the financial industry in general sort of grew. I was a CNBC watcher through my teens. I knew exactly what my major was going to be in college, and graduated in 2000 and went straight into the industry and haven't looked back.
Great time to get into financial services. 2000, markets roaring.
Yeah, I've seen 2 major market crashes. So it's good for perspective, and it's but it's definitely an interesting. I think a lot of advisors that have just got in the industry and seen 7 or 8 years of just all up. It's going to be interesting for them to experience that type of market because it's much different.
It really is. But it's interesting. You said you were a CNBC kid in high school. I'm not sure I've ever met anyone or talked to anyone that watched CNBC in high school. Usually that's reserved for doctors' offices or the hospital, and it just so happens to be on the screen. So what was it about the markets? Was it just intriguing or just a puzzle to figure out? I guess what drew you into that world?
I think that's evolved over time. Just the financial system in general and the macroeconomic system that we, humans have created is interesting to me. I've just wanted to learn more about economics. I majored in economics and finance in college, and I like the system. I like the markets, and I like being a witness to macro events in the economy and how that affects the markets and the reasons why the market goes up and down, and just everything about it just has interested me over my life.
Very cool. Yeah, and it's just so interesting how in reality, what you're watching on CNBC is not what we do on a daily basis, but it at least is a good introduction into sort of the world of personal finance. I guess mine came from Dave Ramsey, which is, again, nothing like what we actually do on a day-to-day basis.
The ironic thing is I manage my clients' money passively. So I learned, I think, from a very early age that it's very difficult to time the market. It's very difficult to pick stocks. And, for me, I think early exposure to CNBC, it started out as being very interested in kind of the game side of it, trying to predict. And it evolved into me finding dimensional fund advisors, in college and really gravitating towards their methodology. And then I don't use DFA right now, but I did for a number of years, and evolving into a more passive approach.
I think there are a lot of advisors that are curious how in the world we sell investment management when it's passive, because if all you sell is investment management, a passive approach is tough. Active's much easier. Like, oh yeah, we historically beat the S&P 500 by 3 percentage points, which is why you should pay us 1 plus 20% of your gains or whatever. Like, it makes more sense, but it's a different conversation when you're trying to sell hey, I don't want this to be sexy. I want this to be boring for you. If it's a game, we've done something wrong.
Yep. Yeah. And I think people that sell the idea, I view asset allocation as a commodity. And I think the people that think that passive investing is, not a good thing, I think lose sight of what we're really doing for the client, which is behavioral management. And I think the fact that we can, use a service like Betterment Institutional can streamline the investment process to a point where there's less mistakes, where the costs are lower, and we can really focus on the important things like getting them not to sell at a bad time or buy at a bad time, focused on their goals, I think is very powerful. Actually, I use Betterment for 100% of my clients, because not only does it provide scalability to our businesses, it automates investing the right way. So I think what we're seeing in the investment management industry is pretty cool.
So you graduated in 2000, got into financial services. What was that first role for you out of school?
I went to work for a company called the Todd Organization. They were owned at the time, I'm not sure if this is still the case, by Northwestern Mutual. They focused on non-qualified executive benefit plans. So the first 3 years of my career was all the analytics around creating those plans, corporate-owned life insurance, and funding those plans with corporate-owned life insurance for the most part, obviously, because we had that relationship with Northwestern Mutual. But it gave me exposure to Fortune 500 working with Fortune 500 companies, and the boards and HR departments, and gave me some good exposure to that a very niche side of the financial planning industry.
Yeah, and how do you get education around something that specific? I mean, is it just learning while you're there? Did they have training courses built out for you or a certification to send you through to get, I mean, because that is a very specific, very detailed thing that I'm assuming it takes a lot of time to get up to speed on.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. I mean, not only there's accounting issues specific to those plans, there's how you design life insurance products is very specific to that marketplace, plan administration issues. So yeah, it was mostly it was on the job. And I worked in that industry for about 4 years. And by the end of it, I learned everything that I wanted to learn and I was ready to move on.
Fair enough. All right. So 4 to 5 years. So this is 2004, 2005. What was sort of the next shift for you?
I actually took a job at Principal Financial Group as a proprietary advisor. And I worked there just long enough to understand how proprietary financial advisors work. I'm happy for that experience, but there were, obviously I knew enough to know that that's not where I wanted to be. After that, I went to a firm called M Financial Group, back into more of a financial analyst role. And I did estate planning for ultra affluent individuals for the most part, but also I sat on the sales desk. So people, their member firms would call in having specific issues, estate planning, insurance issues. We would help them with that. It's similar. I don't know if you're familiar with M Financial Group, but it's kind of a TAMP. It's structured similar to XYPN Network for the insurance industry.
Gotcha. Well, we should start marketing more to users of M Financial. No.
Yeah, and they have their own reinsurance company and all of it, because most of their business is in corporate-owned life insurance and other proprietary insurance products that they actually create with insurance carriers to get preferred pricing. So basically, it's kind of high-level paraplanner work for a period of time for M Financial Group.
Gotcha. And do you have the CFP designation, or did you go through the CFP coursework at any point in this?
Yeah, I've made an active decision not to take the test, but I actually have the CFP books on my desk. I do reading from time to time. I've gone through the Boston University coursework, and I've got that sort of, their little certificate that they give out for completing that. I'm finally to the point, though, where I think it's time to take the test. I think the industry is evolved in a way. I haven't lost any clients because I don't have the CFP designation. However, I think, one, just being a part of XYPN Network, I think it'd be good just to make that commitment and be a part of the group of financial advisors that are promoting fiduciary standard and ongoing learning and all of that. And then second, I think that in the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to need the designation, and clients will become more and more educated to it, and you'll start actually losing clients because of it.
Yeah, and last I saw, something like 70 or 80% of people that graduate with a certificate or a degree, or maybe that statistic's only for a degree in financial planning, never sit for the CFP exam. So can you tell me, most people make that decision. So I guess what fueled that decision? Just didn't see the value of it, or just a disagreement with the CFP board and therefore didn't want to support the designation? Was there a reason, or just made the decision not to?
I think it was, it cost of maintenance. There's cost associated with taking the test. There's a cost associated with, I got all of the education paid for, and then I started my business, and it becomes a bigger chunk of a bigger expense. But to tell you the truth, it could be a little bit just laziness, just that finding the time to go back to the coursework and prepare for the test is challenging for me. My daughter's 10 months old. I take care of her quite a bit. And then I run Henfruit and, all the things associated with that. So it's difficult to find time to really study at this point. So when I do find the time, I think it's time.
That makes sense. Yeah. And like I said, some folks, and I've heard, everyone has sort of a reason, and there's not a good or bad reason, whether you agree with the reason or not. And, some folks just don't agree with some of the CFP board's decisions or the way their governance is or whatnot. But I do agree with you that the reason we have supported it is, is believing that, one, it's the best that we've got, and two, that again, the marketplace is shifting to this fiduciary expectation, and the consumers are starting to ask about the CFP. They are increasing awareness. They're spending a bunch of our annual or biannual dues on marketing and really, trying to drive awareness of the designation, which makes sense. So, all right. So you were with the M Group doing sort of that paraplanning work and that sort of thing. So was there another job after that, or is that when you made the leap?
I actually started a registered investment advisory firm in Portland, Oregon, where I lived. I actually grew up in Portland, Oregon. And in 2007, I started it. And then I launched in 2008, roughly 6 months before the market crash. Yeah, so I kind of struggled. And at the same time, I actually went through a divorce, and it was just it was just everything at once. That business failed after about 2 years, a little less than 2 years. And I went back to working for somebody else. I actually moved to Chicago and worked with a firm called Partners Wealth Management. And I worked there for about 4.5 years as director of research and analytics. I managed a book of about $150 million on a DFA Fidelity InvestNet platform. Did their planning work. I supported the sales, the advisors that went out and kind of found the clients. I supported their marketing effort, and then just managed that book of DFA funds, which actually, that's the reason why I like Betterment so much, is probably 4.5 years of dealing with the service obligations that are associated with having, an outside custodian and overlaying, and trying to figure out your investment philosophy and managing the day-to-day service of a book of that size. It just, when I saw Betterment and the scale of, that scale that can provide, it was a no-brainer for me.
It's very interesting that, you've definitely had the entrepreneurial spirit because, and you didn't let one situation or one, I guess, quote unquote failure, we'll call it a learning experience.
I don't mind the word failure. I'm not scared of that word. I mean, you fail. Sometimes you fail, you know what I mean? And a lot of those stuff, especially with my first business, my first RIA, a little bit of it was, I'm not a very good prospector by nature. So I've had to really work on that. I think that's changed a little bit in this go around. But, the market, when nobody wants to talk to you about their investments, that makes it very difficult to build a business.
It does. It was an interesting time. I mean, I was just coming out of school in the middle of it and ended up staying for grad school just because jobs were hard to come by in 2009. But it was a really traumatizing time for folks and I almost feel like the advisory community has kind of forgotten about it. Because to your point, like we've had 7 years of grand returns. All of the robo advisors started at like the bottom of the market, so their returns, their historical returns are just ridiculous because they started from as low as it could go and have ridden it all the way to the top. But it is interesting that I think a lot of clients remember it sometimes even more so than advisors. I guess it depends on who you're talking to, but.
Yeah, I mean, and as advisors, the biggest thing during those periods is you take on the emotions of your client a lot of times because you care about their situation. And it's, it's not when I see my client accounts go down by 30, 40%, that affects me. That produces a lot of stress, regardless of what you do and the preparations that you make and the knowledge that that stuff like this happens. And it was an interesting time when I was working with my clients during that period because you're saying one thing that's kind of more you're saying something that's very intellectual and trying to give them perspective on, things will bounce back, hang in there. But at the same time, when you get off the call, it's like, you're sick to your stomach and you hope what you say is true. Even the nature of that crash was so, it was insane. I mean, just watching the market in free fall for months, the emotional toll that took, it was a challenge as an advisor to kind of keep a positive spin on things and keep people focused on their goals. And, I feel like I got through it pretty well, but doesn't necessarily mean that, I didn't have to work at doing that. So I think that, and I'll add to that, that because of that experience, it's prepared me for the next crisis. Because right now, for all my clients, I back test everything. I use 2008 as a proxy for volatility. I really try to get the client to that. I know I can't do it fully because most clients that you're going to talk to now are very optimistic, overly optimistic, and that usually breeds a situation where they're much more willing to take risk. And I, as an advisor right now, I feel like part of my job is taking them down a notch and trying to understand what they really are, what their real risk profile is, rather than what's the words that are coming out of their mouth or the answers that they're answering on the risk profile, and trying to get them more numbers based. What if that's why I like tools like Riskalyze, because it quantifies risk in a way that can take the client on that emotional journey of loss, if that makes sense. And I think, and my hope is that because my clients have felt it, or I've tried to get them to feel it a little bit, that it's not going to be as shocking when it happens. And my hope is we don't have another black swan event, but the way our economy is structured, it's very financialized, and that's going to create a lot more booms and busts. And, I don't know, if we're going to see something like 2008, but I think we're going to see some major volatility in the next 5 to 10 years. And I want to prepare my clients for that emotionally,
To add to that, I guess disagree on just one part, and that's the black swan side of it. Like, we were within 2 standard deviations of our bell curve. Like, it could easily happen again. I mean, it shouldn't happen every year, but 2 standard deviations is 95%, I believe, if I can recall my statistics right. So it's got these ups and downs happen, just like the ups are, within 2 standard deviations, I believe. It's been a while since I've looked at it, but you're absolutely right that we have to be able to prepare clients for it. And it'll be interesting to see if, and I'm looking forward to more tools to take clients on a journey of loss, whether it's I'm excited about the concept like virtual reality, of what if I show you your bank account and your investment statements, going down, and what do you do? I almost think of going to the eye doctor, where it's A or B, A or B. And you're like, oh no, this one's bad. Okay, this one's fine. To really understand what it looks like when these things happen, because we all want the reward of the markets going up, but that comes with risk. You don't get free lunches. So, how much are we willing to take on? And like you said, clients can come in overly exuberant because we've done nothing but see it go up. And so maybe I should reword what I said earlier, in that, maybe clients are the ones as well that have forgotten. Maybe we've just sort of all forgotten. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the next year or two, at what point we have some sort of downturn. I mean, even if it's just for a month or two, and we've had a few of those. But so I guess taking a step back, you were working inside of that advisory firm. At what point did you start to think all right, I think I want to give this entrepreneurship thing another go. I think I want to try starting an RIA again.
Well, I think, deep down, I started building an awareness of this maybe the last 2 years I was in that job, but I really prepared myself for Henfruit a lot better than I did the first time. So for 4 years, I lived on 50% of my income, and I saved a lot, what I'm actually, after 2 years, I haven't burned through. So, the idea that you can just quit your job and start an RIA firm with limited resources is starting from zero is, I think, a fallacy. I mean, unless you have support of another financial advisor, or, you buy a book of business or something, or spousal support. Yeah. If if your spouse has a steady job and health insurance, which I do too, then that's helped. But, the preparation, and I carry this over in my planning program, is, anytime somebody's trying to do, make the transition to entrepreneurship, or, that preparation, the financial preparation, the emotional preparation, that's really a big part of that process. And it's the same process that I went through, because I knew from my past experience that it was going to be difficult. It was not going to be easy.
And, like you said, it was a learning process, and knowing now what you learned from them, just on what it takes to be successful. You're absolutely right. If you're 27 or 28 years old with no money in the bank and no income and a couple years of experience, probably not the right time to start a business. And And we've had to backtrack a little bit because I think when we first launched XY Planning Network, we overemphasized this concept of, you can start a business for less than $10,000, which is true, but that doesn't take into account the personal budget and that you've got to pay the bills to keep the lights on at home. And so, you're right that if you have a spouse or a partner that's able to keep the lights on while you build the business, it certainly helps and takes a lot of the pressure off. It doesn't make it easy. So we've been working hard to be sure folks know, you need runway, you need a couple of years, which we'll talk about just on how your journey has been and how much runway, you really ultimately needed. But it is there's such a major difference between barely being able to pay the bills and having enough cushion that you can relax a little bit, which gives you permission to turn away that client that you shouldn't take on, or be able to buy a piece of software that you really think will help you, service your clients better or grow or scale faster and that sort of thing. So sort of speeding up to ultimately you launched or started the process in 2014. What was the tipping point for you? I guess what finally made you say, okay, now I'm ready to give this thing a go again?
I was just ready. I was prepared is the big thing. I think, I was prepared to do it. I had saved up enough money. I was in a position where I was thinking about moving back to Oregon. So that was originally I registered my LLC in Oregon. But I met my current wife. That kind of changed everything. So I'm in Noblesville, Indiana. The rest is history.
So the name of your company is Henfruit. Where did that come from? It's a very unique name.
It's a slang term for an egg. I wanted to have the concept of a nest egg. I didn't want to call myself Mirabella Financial Planning or anything like that. So I was looking for a little bit, something that's just a little different. I was just kind of doing an internet search and kind of just getting creative with concepts, financial concepts, and saw this word that was kind of cool, and the domain name was available. It's worked. I think I still like it after 2 years, so it was a good choice.
Yeah, it's always scary. Naming your business is like when you name a baby and you're you're going to have this name for forever. Fortunately, with kids, we don't actually have to look up the domain name to be sure if it's available, because I went through a lot of company names that I couldn't use because domains weren't around. But it is interesting where things come from. So I like that, though, that sort of that nest egg reference, which I don't know, maybe Henfruit is something most folks know. It's not something I've ever heard.
I think my story is that my marketing story is Henfruit. It's a kind of a different take on the nest egg. My practice is very behavioral. I call myself a behavioral financial planning firm. I really focused on cash flow planning and adjusting behaviors and mapping your spending decisions to your values, and kind of evolve the conversation past just saving for retirement and saving for just this far off thing, retirement or whatever it is that means for you, but living in the present. So I don't know if there was a marketing story behind it, that would be kind of the direction that I would take it.
Sure. No, that makes perfect sense. So why start your own firm? I guess what was the motivation? Was it just do your own thing, wanted to be your own boss? Was there a certain client segment you wanted to reach? What was the motivation factor ultimately for going solo?
I think lifestyle. My why behind the business is I want to create a scalable business, a scalable planning business where I can serve my clients virtually and really create the lifestyle that I can spend with the two most important people in my life, which are my wife and my daughter. So, whatever I'm not out to make, $1 zillion, but I see this coupled with a lot of the changes that are happening in our industry and the willingness for people to work virtually. And I just see it as a huge business opportunity to create, kind of a one-man shop over time. And I think it'll take a little longer than probably more traditional avenues, but if I look out 5-7 years, to have a 100 to 150 person firm that I can manage from my home office is very appealing to me, and be able to be an active participant in my daughter's childhood and spend the time with my wife and all of that. So that's the reason why I created Henfruit. That's the reason why I'm structured the way I'm structured. I try to keep my expenses really low. Since I don't have office space, my expenses are, and I work with a lot of tools, and my expenses are, $15,000 a year. So that scales really well, especially if you have 100, and even if you're outsourcing paraplanning work and all of that, the numbers work, especially if you're charging, a reasonable amount for service.
And listeners have heard me harp on this before, but it's all about your why and being focused on your why, because your why and the reason you're building your business is driving, the decisions that you make around what you spend money on and who you hire and whether or not you get office space. It's like, people will say, do I need an office? And it's like, well, it depends. Why are you building your business? Well, what's the purpose of it? If your goal was to reach, I want $1 billion AUM and help tens of thousands of clients, like, cool. Yeah, you're probably going to need an office space.
Yeah. And I think it's easy on the front end when you're just starting your business to say, I don't need a why. I'm going to make my business successful. The process of building a business is very difficult, and there's going to be things that you don't think about, and there's going to be, hardships, and there's going to be clients that fire you, and there's going to be clients that don't work, there's going to be prospects that don't work with you, and it's going to take things are going to take longer than you expect, and you have to have that foundation. You have to go back to it and say, okay, why am I even doing this? Because it's much more likely that you quit if you're in that emotional state where you're, you think all is lost, and you're in that, Seth Godin says, that dip. How are you going to get out of that dip if you have no reason to get out of the dip? You know what I mean? So that's a huge reason why you need a very well thought out reason why you're starting the business.
Yeah. And I look at myself when I started my business, and I built the wrong business model, like for my lifestyle. Like I sort of woke up about 6 months in and realized that I was building towards something that wasn't going to make me happy, which I'm glad I realized it 6 months in and not 6 years in or 20 years in when I finally had that realization. But that pivot was hard. I have admittedly, I just sort of talk about, oh yeah, like I moved out to Montana, no big deal. But like, that was not the easiest transition in the world to have to tell your client or have to tell my clients, like, yeah, you know what, we've been meeting face to face, no more. Like, it's all virtual now. Change your marketing and change the networking that you're doing and where you're getting clients and the messaging and all of that. It all changes. So it's not to say you can't pivot, but if you can avoid the pivot by actually just taking some time and thinking through, like, why am I doing this? I just want to build a business is not a reason enough, I don't think.
And it's interesting. I think a lot of advisors, they think the clients will do whatever you tell them. The expectation that you set on, you can set any expectation with the client on the front end that you want. You can set the expectation that you're going to work virtually. You're going to set the expectation that you're going to manage money in a passive way. You set the expectation about how your planning process is going to go. And there's no you have full control over how you structure that. And I designed my planning service with that in mind. So mine is I don't do things because I think the client wants it. I do things that I think are in the client's best interest. And then I sort of go through a process of retraining them if they need to accept it and show them the value of why they're doing it, and why it makes it easier to work together. It's sort of the same thing with active management. I think a lot of people feel like they need to sell active management, but on the investment side, a lot of people just don't care. So I don't understand if you can use a tool like Betterment, you can manage in a passive way, you can focus on the things that really matter. You don't need to tinker with portfolios to justify your fee. You're not getting paid for the asset allocation. You're getting paid for the behavior and the goal and aligning that investment policy with their goals.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I know it's easier, or we think it's easier. We've just been trained to sell complexity and sell action, right? So like, look at all these trades I did, so therefore I must be taking care of you and earning my fee, as opposed to saying like, hey, we didn't make any trades this year because we don't think you need to, because we value action as opposed to just, oh, we just monitored your account. Is that really worth 1%? And it absolutely is, but it's a little bit different conversation that you have to learn how to hone that sale to your clients.
Yeah, and from a business perspective, with every decision that I make in my business, I try to think about how that's going to feel and look at 100 or 150 or 200 clients. And when I think about the way of using an outside custodian and being responsible for trades and being responsible for all the things that go along with having more, quote unquote, more control over client portfolios, and then the benefit that creates relative to the benefit that creates, it seems doesn't map. I mean, you've got at 100 and 150 clients, you're either going to be forced to outsource, you're going to be forced to either hire people. And what lifestyle are you creating through that process? So that I go through that not only with investment management, but anything that I add to the financial planning process, because it may be easy to do 1 or 5 times, but if you're replicating that over a book of clients, what does that do to your service infrastructure, and what does that do to your quality of life, and what does that do to your, what the people you have to hire, and are you creating something that you don't want? You know what I mean? So I think a lot of people get to that point where they've created something that they didn't expect. And I think that's a lot of the reasons why that happens is because they're not conscious of the service commitments that they're making on the front end when they started. You know what I mean?
It is a really great point. I was talking to a planner that when they first started their business, they emailed every client once a month with their current to-dos, and so they would go down their list. Their 5 clients would get an email, and then their 10 clients would get an email, and then their 20 clients were getting an email. And suddenly it was like, oh my gosh, I can't do this manually anymore, but I also can't stop, because now I've set the expectation that they're going to get a customized email from me every month with my to-dos and checking in and a personalized touch, which is great if you can scale it. Now, this planner wasn't charging enough, as many of us do. We undercharge in our first year. And so therefore, like, the lowest paying clients are getting the highest level of service, because that was the expectation that they set up front. And we were able to find some ways to automate it with technology. But like, those are the types of things that you do because you want to take care of your clients and do right by them, as you should. But, I think it's a great framing to think about things in the sense of, can I do this for 100 clients? Like, what happens if I have 100 clients? Is this manageable? And it's important to keep that in mind, because one day you may be at 100 clients and you don't want to look back and go, oh man, I really screwed this up because I have this inefficient thing that I'm doing. So who is your typical client? Do you have sort of a commonality among your clients or niche market that you're focused on, or is it more regional or local based there in Indiana?
I would say that it's changed. So I've actually, during the last 3-4 months, I've really made a commitment to niche marketing, and I've chosen to select architects as my primary focus. I wasn't sold on the idea of niche marketing initially, but now that I'm getting into it, I really see the power of, having that specific niche and having content and being able to speak to an audience that, here's the same terminology on a day-to-day basis through their either profession or whatever they're doing. So that's the first thing. So I think I thank you for that push, because a lot of the content that you guys put out around niche marketing over the last 2 years has slowly sold me on that. So that, coupled with for the whole 2 years, I haven't really niched to a demo, but internally in my practice, I niched to a mindset. So my planning process is really built around the millionaire next door mindset. So my ideal client is people that are, want to be rich, not act rich. So, when I have client meetings or prospecting meetings, I'm trying to look for people that are socially indifferent or want to move towards that, social indifference. They tend to be naturally frugal, the things that really build wealth. A lot of my social media right now is around these wealth behaviors, and I'm using tools like data points to really focus on the behavioral aspects of building wealth. And so as far as, I guess my niche has gotten very specific over the last 4 months, because it used to be that, but now it's that mindset coupled with architects. You know what I mean? So it's very specific now. So we'll see how that works. But generally, I'll work with anybody, but they have to get it. And I'm like this, so I framed my marketing plan around who I am. And I didn't actually do this initially, and I was running into a lot of friction because I wasn't having the conversations I was having and my value system wasn't resonating with the individual that was sitting across with me, right? Because they wanted to buy as much house as they could. They wanted to buy the nicest car that they could. And then they wanted to back into their retirement savings or back into their lifestyle, their ideal lifestyle just as long as they got all the things, you know what I mean? So I was constantly kind of having those kind of conflicts in my conversations. So now I really look for that mindset. And I don't know if you've seen Data Points, but it's their new version, the 2.0 version of Data Points is pretty cool.
I have not. They were one of our finalists last year for the FinTech competition at the XY Planning Network conference. Is that the same Data Points?
Yep. Yeah. They just rolled out their 2.0 version, and I actually use it on my website as a kind of a freemium. And then they have two different surveys, or actually three different surveys on the front end for prospecting. And then on the back end, they have this really cool behavioral finance report on different areas of different wealth building behaviors. And it's a great tool, I think, for firms that want to focus on the behavioral aspects. And I've chosen to really focus my firm on behavior and changing behavior. And because I think that's where we can really differentiate ourselves. I think the math side of our business is really getting commoditized. There's an oversupply of information. I think it's very difficult in today's marketplace to differentiate based on your investment philosophy or the amount that you know. And I think I think empathy scales very well in a financial planning practice because one, I think it generates conversations that the client actually wants to have. They don't want to have planning and math conversations with you. They want to talk about their life. They want to talk about what's important to them. They want you to be a sounding board when things go bad. They want you to celebrate in their wins. To me, that's what being a financial planner is all about. So I try to actually put most of the math on the back, behind the curtain as much as I can and deliver my planning process in what I call bite-sized pieces. So I only deliver the math that I need to deliver so that they understand why we're doing what we're doing. And then we quickly go back into the art side of the conversation.
So I'll have to check out Data Points again. It was created, if I remember right, by the daughter of Tom Stanley, Dr. Stanley, who wrote The Millionaire Next Door. If I remember right, that was the relationship. But I remember last year at the FinTech conference, I was looking at it thinking like, this has so much awesome information. What do I do with it? It felt like big data. So it's awesome to hear that their 2.0 has sort of shifted into more of an actionable system that actually is that you can implement, which is always hard when something's like uber data driven. So one thing, if I remember, I'm trying to remember the dates on it, but I believe it was after the XYPN 16 conference. Did you merged firms with another XYPN member? Is that correct?
Well, he was just starting out, so he decided to, rather than starting his own firm, he came onto my firm as an IAR to get started. He hasn't had a whole lot of experience in the industry. He's done a podcast for, I think a couple years. He's mostly self-taught in the finance, in as far as the technical aspects of the business. So really our relationship is I run the business. I do the planning, I help him on calls, and then he goes and he finds the clients. So that's his role. So we've tried to identify what our strengths are and then apply that.
So how has that process been for you? Because we don't talk to a lot of folks, sort of at that 2-year mark that have hired this early, but it sounds like that's sort of a match made in heaven. So how has that transition been, I guess, having another party there to help provide services?
He's an independent contractor. So he's not an employee of Henfruit. He's just a straight investment advisor representative. So he goes out and finds a business. We have a split that we've arranged and then he didn't come in with a book of business. So we have an arrangement where when he hits certain revenue goals, then he becomes a partner over time. Yeah. So that's our arrangement.
Very cool. So yeah. So is he then a solicitor of your firm, or are you a solicitor? What's the compliance side of that?
No, they're just joint clients. So he's kind of you can think of it as he's like the relationship manager in his clients. And then we have joint planning calls, and then he's responsible for reaching out on certain service issues and getting them completed. But I do all the planning, and like he's actually in Valparaiso and I'm in Noblesville. He has no book, our firm is in Noblesville. He doesn't have any books and records. He accesses tools that I use, but in this phase of our relationship, it's mostly he's acting as the marketer and the relationship manager for his clients, and I'm supporting him in that effort with compliance, all the other stuff. You know what I mean?
That makes sense. Yeah. And there's so many unique and creative ways to do this. This is a very unique way of partnering with someone, which is really cool that, to, I guess, sort of test run the relationship, let you play to your strengths, let him play to his strengths and that sort of thing. That's awesome.
And it limits the risk for both sides because he gets something. He doesn't have to build infrastructure. He doesn't, he's leveraging my expertise and my experience in the industry, and I'm leveraging his expertise in prospecting. So, and I think to a certain extent, they're equally valuable in this business. If you can't prospect, then, and I do my own prospecting as well, but if you can't prospect, it's going to be very, unless you have somebody that's giving you clients, or it's going to be very difficult to make in this business. Marketing is a huge part of it.
It really is. And our last guest, actually, we're with Ryan. We actually had the same conversation where it's like, what's more important between the ability to communicate, talk to clients, and the ability to perform the services? It's like, well, they're both important, and you're probably going to fail without both. But, it ultimately, the world's greatest planner, if you can't generate business, is not going to be a business for very long, unfortunately. There is that component. All right, so we're 2 years in. I guess, what are some of the learning pieces that you've had as you've grown your business in terms of just sort of, you said you're sort of shifting your commitment or making the commitment, shifting the focus into having a niche market and working with architects. What else? Anything about sort of your pricing or the structure of your planning process that you're really honing in on now that, listeners could, I guess, use as a shortcut, use some of your learning as a shortcut for them?
When I started, I probably was like a lot of people where I didn't want to overprice. I wanted to be able to work with, the family that makes, $85,000, $75,000, $85,000 a year household. And I didn't want to price them out of my services. However, I learned relatively quickly that that's not going to work long term, because I can't price it in a way for those people. I either have to come up with a different product, but I can't give them at least how I've created my client experience. I can't deliver that in a profitable way to that market. So the one thing I did was I split up my product offering. I have actually what's called I have two programs now. One's called Cash Flow Mastermind that focuses on goal setting and cash flow management exclusively. And we have periodic calls to talk about, are their behaviors aligned with their value system and the goals that they set? So I coach them in that way over time, and we build cash flow plan, and that cash flow plan evolves over time. So I've created a separate product for that marketplace that doesn't involve comprehensive planning. And then I raised my prices a lot on what I call my financial wellness program, and I targeted I'm targeting people with higher incomes so that I could create a client experience that added a lot of value and that created a profitable firm. Because I'm actually in the process of my ADV change with the Betterment pricing change. I'm actually part of that change is going to be an increase in my financial wellness program. So I wanted to segment those groups, and my specific recommendation for people just starting out would be don't underprice yourself, because clients don't care as much as you think about pricing. I think there's a lot of talk going on in industry I think this is true on the investment side, that there is some fee compression. But as long as your client experience, the value of your client experience maps with your pricing, that should be your main concern. Your main concern should not be the nominal amount that you charge. Because if you're adding value, the client will pay for it and they'll stick with you. I think you can actually do yourself a little bit of a disservice by underpricing your services, because when clients pay a little amount, they automatically think they're getting a little bit of value. So, and it took me a little bit to understand that. So I'm fixing that right now.
Yeah, it's a tough, it's easier to lower fees than to raise them for sure. And you can always raise fees over time a little bit, but going from $50 a month to $150 a month because you realize you significantly underpriced yourself, not a fun conversation to have. So I think that's great advice in terms of just sort of trying to keep the pricing where it makes sense. Now, where is your pricing with Betterment? So do you charge an AUM fee on top of their fee, or do you have the clients pay the fee directly? I guess how is that structured in your firm?
I have I have no upfront fee. And I have, so I'm going to talk in terms of my new pricing structure. I have no upfront fee, just a monthly fee for ongoing planning. Either depending on if I work with them for the just cash flow mastermind or financial wellness, it's just a monthly fee. And then for the clients that want me to manage their money, I do charge a separate fee, which is 80 bips all in. So I get my net there is 60 and the new fee at Betterment would be 20. So I think since I price my service based on household income, I feel like charging based on AUM scales my pricing in a way that considers complexity. Because if you have without charging based on net worth, so if you have assets to manage, there's some more complexity that's added to their financial situation. And so that was my original thought is that having those two services separate, it scales for complexity and it gives the client the opportunity to be able to, if they're in a planning relationship with me, they can go out and do Betterment retail if they want, or it's a separate service. So they don't necessarily have to have me manage their investments.
And obviously we're huge proponents of that model. And the reason being because I do think it allows you to scale the AUM side, but gives you some, protection, I guess. If folks want to go back and listen to a couple episodes ago, Michael and I talked about our views on fee compression. And I think there's a much bigger risk on the investment management side than the planning side on fee compression, but the value is still there. The value that we provide in terms of behavioral management and helping clients make good decisions is still there on the asset side, but ultimately the real value of what we do is on the planning side. And I think anyone who does real financial planning or has ever been a client of a real financial planner, there's no doubt there that where the value really is when it comes to all of this. So, and when it comes to the service we provide. So I think that's appropriate. So as we're sort of wrapping up, you gave one great piece of advice being don't underprice yourself. So I'll give you the opportunity to give one more piece of advice if you have any. And that's, sort of if there's one thing that you wish you knew now, I ask this question every episode and I still screw it up. If there's one thing you wish you had known then that you know now, so one thing when you were launching your firm or in the midst of it, growing your practice, that one piece of advice you wish you could go back and give yourself, what do you think that thing would be?
I would say understand your strengths and understand your weaknesses. And I think for me, I had a problem where I wanted to retain everything that was going on in my business, just from both a cost standpoint, and I just didn't want to lose control of that. And the moment I started thinking about it in terms of, okay, what am I really good at? And then all the things I'm not good at, how can I bring in experts in those areas to make my firm better? So and I know for me, it's the prospecting side of things. I made a decision. I made a significant investment in working through and creating a process of lead generation. It's working, and it's the best decision I've ever made. So think about, just self-awareness is so huge in this business. And understanding, are you highly technical? Are you a great marketer? Are you great with, client experience and delivering client experience and operations? And then fill in the gaps and only do what you're really good at. And it may take a little while because, to one, figure it out, but also get to a point where you have the money to outsource. Keep that in mind over time and try to, in a cost-effective way, try to find things that you can be not doing so you can do other things that have more impact to growing your business.
I love it. I think it's great advice. So Jason, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast and share how things have gone in your first couple of years. I'm excited to see your continued success and watch you continue to grow the business while also balancing lifestyle and time with your daughter and family. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Don't forget to check out Ready2 Technologies and specifically their BillFin solution for financial advisors and RIAs. Designed to be simple and affordable, BillFin automates your fee calculations, creates great-looking client invoices, and generates your custodian fee file. If your accounts are at TD, Schwab, or RBC, they've got you covered. Using a custodian not yet integrated with BillFin? No problem. BillFin offers an easy upload portal where you can upload your data from an Excel spreadsheet until your particular custodial integration is available. Ready2 offers 1 week free trials of BillFin, so visit www.billfin.com or call 617-315-8101 to get started. And we hear their product support team is top-notch. Oh yeah, and their plans start at just $39 a month with an annual contract. Definitely go check them out. Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitsis, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.